Senate Bill 206 be amended as follows. Necessary to be referred to the committee of the whole. Favor recommendation.
All right.
You're good.
Madam Majority Leader. Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move a call of the House.
The call of the House has been moved. It has been properly sustained. The sergeants will lock the doors. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members indicate your presence. Mr. Kohler, please call out the names of the members who are not here.
Representatives Becker, Buck, Buckner, Conti, Coram, Del Grosso, Dorr, Duran, Everett, Foote, Gardner, Giroux, Hamner, Holbert, Humphrey, Kagan, Landgraf, Lawrence, Lebsock, Lee, May, McLaughlin, McNulty, Melton, Moreno.
Just press your button, Lebsock. That's
Nordberg, Pabon, Pedersen, Priola, Sane, Salazar, Sonnenberg, and Szabo. Melton. Jovan Melton. Oh, I had more. Sorry. Can we do this while we're doing the call? No. We'll wait till after. Okay, so.
All the reports will be up when I do everything. These are on. Read it. Just read it, right? No, right. It'll be up each side. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Which I think is back to...
No, we did.
members who are present in the chamber, please push your buttons to indicate your presence.
Representatives Becker, Buckner, Conti, Del Grosso, Everett, Holbert, Kagan, Lee, McLaughlin, McNulty, Pabon, Sane, Sonnenberg, and Szabo.
Representatives Becker and Lee. Representative Del Grosso. Majority Leader.
Madam Majority Leader?
Representative Hellinghorst.
Dickie Lee, to raise your call. Yes. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to raise the call of the House.
Seeing no objection, the call of the House will be raised. Reports of committees of reference.
Committee on Finance, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends following House Bill 1398 be amended as follows. And that's so to refer to the Committee on Appropriations with favorable recommendation. The Committee on Judiciary, after consideration on the merits, the committee recommends following Senate Bill 23 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation. Senate Bill 212 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation.
We'll proceed to our next order of business, third reading of bills, final passage. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to Senate Bill. Madam Majority Leader, you want to lay over 174 for a couple bills?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to lay over Senate Bill 174, two bills.
Seeing no objection, Senate Bill 174 will be laid over two bills. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 182.
Senate Bill 182 by Senator Hodge, also Representative Pendleton, concerning procedures governing discussions by boards of education of school districts while meeting in executive session.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 182 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing discussion, Representative McNulty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we had some discussion about this on second reading. On the original bill that Representative Pendleton brought, we had a fairly significant level of discussion. The main objection hasn't changed. I appreciate the work that Representative Pendleton has done to address issues that Representative Gardner, myself, and others had with the bill and attorney-client privilege. And Representative Pendleton, I do appreciate that. But the underlying issue here is one that is unsaid by the bill's proponents, but one that came through in the hearing on your original bill and one that came through in the hearing on this bill, and that is this. The original bill and the bill you have now are simply attempts to relitigate school board elections that we had last November. The committee testimony was absolutely clear about that on the first bill. It was even more clear in the second bill, this bill, that came through Education Committee. And that's not what we're here to do. We don't like outcomes of elections. I certainly don't like the outcome of the last election. I had a pretty nice office. It's now occupied by somebody else. But my job coming back here these last 2 years was not to relitigate the last election. My job is to make sure that I'm representing my constituents in Highlands Ranch and doing my best to advocate good public policy for the state of Colorado. This bill relitigates those school board elections and creates bad public policy for the state of Colorado. Early on, when we had the first bill that Representative Pendleton brought across, I went to her and I said, let's make this apply to all governmental entities. If we're going to do this for school boards, let's make everyone play by the same rules. She said, I tried that. I tried that and the bill died. People didn't like it. I don't know why they didn't like it. I don't remember the debate that happened on that bill. Representative Pendleton is certainly more knowledgeable about that than I. But if it wasn't good then, why is it good now when we're singling out one type of local government? One. If it's good for our school boards, as Representative Pendleton has argued, why would it not be good for every type, A, every type of local government, and B, anyone who is appointed by the governor and has rulemaking authority, quasi-governmental entities, state agencies, the state government? Why doesn't it work there? The answer is because the bill would die. Because all of those people believe that it would be contrary to good public policy. So we're left here with this bill that affects only school boards. And affects only school boards because people don't like, because some folks here and some folks out in suburban Denver don't like the way school board elections turned out. But the people voted. The people voted, and we don't come down here to relitigate these types of things. We come down here to craft public policy, and we have disagreements over what might be our favored public policy or something that we think is the best interest of Colorado, and those are always valid and unqualified debates. And that's what we do down here. So I ran an amendment and said, okay, if this is about transparency, then let's make sure that the single greatest expenditure that school boards have is open to full public view. Collective bargaining agreements. The single largest expense. I suspect that even the people who are bound by those collective bargaining agreements, our teachers and school staff, some school staff who work so hard on behalf of us and our children, would be really interested to know what their union negotiators are attempting to negotiate on their behalf. And I also suspect that they might not be happy with what they learn. So there is a very real and a very valid public policy purpose for making those negotiations public, and for this General Assembly saying they shall be public. Every piece of those negotiations shall be public, they shall be done in the light of day, and that the directions that are given to the school district's union negotiators shall be exempt from executive session. But that amendment was rejected. It was rejected on the first bill, was rejected on this bill. And so then we're left with what, in my opinion, is a simple yet overt attempt to attack certain school boards and, in reality and practically, to attack the parents and students and teachers of those school districts. One of the witnesses who testified said, we elected that school board 52-48. I was one of the 48. She is a constituent in Highlands Ranch. We have a different perspective. I appreciate very much her willingness to come to the state capitol at some difficulty to her, as I remember, Representative Peniston. She had child care issues to work out and the things that working families in Highlands Ranch often have to deal with. But she made that sacrifice to join us for committee and testify. But this isn't about transparency. If this was about transparency, this would be about making sure that the greatest expenditure on behalf of these school districts is subject to the light of day. And Representative Salazar, if you come up and talk, I suspect I know what you're going to say. And so I may reserve some of my time for my second. You're not coming up? Promise? I can keep going? I appreciate that too. If a school board decides to hold their instructions to their union negotiators private, they can do that. The amendment that I offered would have said, you can't do that. If this bill is about transparency, if we want to have a fully transparent process, then let's make the largest expenditure fully transparent. And that amendment was rejected. So, colleagues, I will leave you with this. If we're about transparency, let's be about transparency. For all of our local governments, all of our state agencies, all of our appointed boards and commissions that have rulemaking authority, Let's be about transparency. Let's not single out one form of local government because we don't like the way, some don't like the way, the elections turned out. I ask for a no vote on Senate Bill 182.
Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, Representative Tennyson. I was surprised when I saw this bill once again with a Senate number on it. You will, I think, recall that an earlier version of this bill that was somewhat different, a House bill, resulted in my standing here very early in the session and speaking for, I think, my allotted 10 minutes at that time about the encroachment of that bill upon the attorney-client privilege. And I said at the time, and I think this must have had the desired effect, because I said to other publicly elected boards that if they did not draw the line, they would be next. Representative McNulty makes the point that in committee he said, well, if this is good for school boards and you really believe this, then you should have this bill apply to everyone. So I was pleased when the predecessor bill died and surprised when I saw this bill come back. And so I whipped it open because, if you will recall, my concern with the prior bill was that it was a significant encroachment upon the attorney-client privilege. And Representative Salazar, I believe, was among those who came and said it wasn't at all. No. And I gather, for whatever reason, there were those in the Senate who more reasonable minds prevailed, in my view. And I looked at this bill and I realized that it was an improvement, but it does not solve the problem. It's an improvement because it no longer has the provision that says that, well, it no longer has this provision that wipes away the attorney-client privilege with respect to turning the recorder off so that an attorney, he or she, can give unfettered, unrecorded legal advice to his client, her client, the board, with the potential for litigating whether or not all of that was attorney-client privilege or whether certain sentences were and so forth. But at that time, I also objected to what is still in this bill and what I believe the way it's written it is intended to cover, and that is that when that attorney advises the client board that we are about to discuss something or a set of things that are attorney-client privileged, I state and want to state for the record and put in the minutes that the recorder may be turned off so that we can discuss attorney-client privilege material that should not be made of record. This still has a provision that says, so each topic that I've been an attorney to public boards, to school boards as well, that I need, along with the board, to keep track of how much time I discuss each item with that board. And that board then needs to say, if we spend 45 minutes or an hour on a set of topics, a personnel matter, union negotiations, and a contract dispute of a routine nature, that we have to keep a record of how much time is spent on each one of those items. Now, for those of you who aren't lawyers, that may seem like not a big deal. But I've also been on the other side of these things as a plaintiff's attorney against school districts. And I've wanted nothing more than to know, is this an easy issue for the board so that when they get advised about it, they spend about 5 minutes talking about it? Or is this a really hard issue for the board that they spend about 45 minutes of the hour talking about, and they spend about 10 minutes on the contract thing and about 5 minutes on the personnel issue? Or an expulsion issue. And I've represented clients in expulsion issues by school boards. This requirement that they list how much time I or someone like me consults with a client, the board, publicly, is an encroachment upon the attorney-client privilege. It is not good public policy. And I will say, though the lobby is not as full this evening as it was on that day, universities, special districts, municipalities, counties, I am shocked that you are not opposing this bill because you will be next. Your executive session and your executive session in which you receive legal advice is going to be compromised. Now, I am not as familiar being, as Representative McNulty, being from the rather quiet and non-confrontational, non-contentious area of our state, El Paso County, where we don't have these kinds of disputes. So I have to say I'm not really intimately familiar with how this is being relitigated. I have some sort of secondhand sense that there's all this friction and people are not happy with the outcome of the election. So my coming to the well to talk about this is not even founded on that. It is simply on the basic public policy concern that when an attorney gives legal advice, even the duration of the time with which he or she speaks to the client is itself privileged. You say, well, so what's the harm? Let me say this one more time. If the board goes into executive session for an hour and they have 3 items and one of them is privileged, and the opposing counsel is going to be very interested in, well, was that an easy thing or a hard thing? Was the board asking a lot of questions? And how long did it take them to arrive at the decision? Now, maybe the inferences will be incorrect, maybe they'll be correct. You know, you get pretty good after you've been a simple country lawyer for 30 years, you get pretty good at figuring out what a long discussion means and what a short discussion means. And this will compromise that very privilege between the attorney and his or her client, the school board. Now, it is curious to me that if we're going to make this major compromise in public policy, and one in which I think is on May 1st, Law Day, of all days, to be voting on, just a travesty, it is curious to me that we are unwilling to create the transparency associated with union negotiations. We're willing to compromise the attorney-client privilege. We're willing to put our elected school boards, no matter where they are in all of this deal. I mean, I've had school boards that I thought were non-reform, that I was representing someone against them. And I've represented reform school boards But it doesn't matter in either case. This is about the higher principle about school boards and their executive sessions and their advice with their attorneys. It is not good public policy. So if it is to relitigate a case and to try to relitigate an election, it is for the wrong motivation. I don't know if that's the case or not, but it is bad public policy.
Representative Gardner, your time has expired.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's very clear that I'm asking for no vote. Thank you.
Representative Priola.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I rise in opposition to Senate Bill 182. Just as I rose in opposition of the earlier bill, the House bill that came through here that Representative Peniston was carrying, this bill is slightly different, but I think the genesis of it is much the same. There has been a change in school boards that we are all aware of in the last few years, and I submit to you that that is the reason for this bill. I don't know exactly how long the previous statute has been in law, but I submit to you it's probably been more than a few decades. And there was no thought or concern of changing the law. But now we have a system or a proposal here that it will require, in my opinion, getting to the levels of minutiae that are only for one reason: to try to harass that very board with further questions, death by 1,000 cuts, stopping them from doing what they've done for decades and simply make decisions when they need to use executive session for the betterment of the education of the kids of the state of Colorado. And I ask you why we are seeing the second version of the House bill come through, this bill here, Senate Bill 82, in the same year, that in my opinion is simply targeted at those school boards that are trying to implement common sense reform for the parents and the taxpayers of the state of Colorado, who had their voice at the ballot box and made a decision and selected folks who they expected to implement certain reforms. And now, down here at the state legislature, we are trying, not we, myself, but there are those who are trying to game the system to say, we know you won an election, but we're going to make your life more difficult to do the job that you were elected to do, to implement reforms that get our kids from 40 and 50% proficient up to 80% proficient in certain areas, certain skills that they will need to compete in the 21st century. Members, Senate Bill 182 is completely unnecessary. It wasn't necessary in the aughts, or whatever we call the last decade. It wasn't necessary in the 90s and the 80s and the 70s. And it's not necessary now. I ask for a no vote.
Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, I find it interesting as I sit and listen to this and think through it and think through the two bills that we've been talking about, Representative Peniston, and I start thinking about how many in this chamber have sat through an executive session and how many of us have sat through a whole bunch of executive sessions. And I can't recall in all my 40 years in education ever having been in an executive session where the main topic of discussion was how the election came out and what we're going to do in our district because of how that election came out. Now, I may have led a sheltered life in my 40 years, but that wouldn't be the first time I was sheltered from a lot of things. But as I consider what we're talking about here, I've heard this discussed twice in those committees, and both times we talked about 2 school districts out of 178. 2 school districts out of 178. As I think back on those executive sessions, there's a lot of good things that take place in those executive sessions, folks. Things you really don't want out in the public. When you're dealing with students, when you're dealing with staff, and most of all, when they were dealing with my evaluation and my contract. And I can tell you through the years, I disagreed a lot of times with those evaluations. And I disagreed a lot of times with the contract that was set forth. It never once crossed my mind that I should come to the Colorado legislature and get the law changed because I disagreed with what was going on by those elected officials that were elected by the majority of the voters in that district to do the business of that district. The last time I was up here, I talked about stakeholders. And I had a couple of questions for Representative Penniston and didn't get an answer, and boy, that irritated me, but that's just me. But the stakeholders that we talk about in this, obviously we've talked to a couple of school districts, but did we talk to the people who represent the other 176 districts in Colorado and how they felt about it? I think not. We talk about how long it takes to make a decision, and that by posting this time limit, that should make a difference on what we try to figure out what happened in that executive session by how long they spent on each one of those items. And colleagues, you all are aware in a court of law, in a capital murder case, sometimes they go and they debate and deliberate as a jury for days. And other times they come back in 2 hours. It does not make any difference on the decision. The magnitude of the decision was the same. But if you looked at one case and said they only deliberated 2 hours, you look at another one, they deliberated 10 days, that must have been a serious issue on the 10 days. Maybe it was just blatantly obvious on the 2-hour deliberation. There have been times in executive session that when I was recommending expulsion of a child, which I did not take lightly, the decision didn't take long. There have been other times we deliberated long and hard. So the time doesn't make a difference on it. The thing that I would leave you with, colleagues, that I think you should consider as you're deciding on how you're going to vote on this, if you haven't already decided. Executive sessions serve many purposes. One of the most minute and minuscule, I believe, is how an election came out. Because in my years of experience, one of the most fascinating things that I saw with people elected to boards of education, they ran on an issue, they had an axe to grind, they got it ground and wondered what they were going to do with the rest of the time that they served on that board. That was the revelation to them. Because then they were about the business of what is best for the children in the state of Colorado. It didn't take long for the axe to get ground. And believe me, I've been in on that side of it too. I was a basketball coach at one time, and you know how that works. I would have you consider, folks, 2 out of 178 school districts have a problem. So we are going to pass a law that affects every other school district in the state of Colorado just to try to rectify a local problem. It's just not right. I ask for a no vote.
Representative McNulty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Give me a 30-second warning.
I'll decide.
Fair enough. You're looking at the timer.
That's true.
Representative Gardner brings up a good point. And this is a point that was addressed in the first bill. I don't recall it being addressed in the second bill, Representative Penniston. But it is the issue of mischief. The issue of mischief being caused not just for the several school districts that I believe are the target of this bill, but for every other school district in the state that will now be subject to these same requirements that no other local government is subject to, type of local government is subject to. So you have reform-minded parents now
Representative McNulty, you have 30 seconds.
going after anti-reform school boards, and you have anti-reform advocates like the CEA going after reform-minded school boards, and we just create this environment of litigation. That doesn't help kids. That doesn't help students. It doesn't help
McNulty, you have
teachers
10 seconds.
teach in the classroom, and it certainly doesn't help us formulate good public policy here. I ask for a no vote.
Perfect, 0. Representative Peniston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and colleagues. This is about transparency. Purely and simply, this is about transparency for taxpayers, for parents, to understand a little bit better what their elected officials are all about. And I don't think any of us believe down here that once someone's elected, be it us, be it a member of a school board, that then for the rest of the time you're elected, it's just flat out hands off, taxpayers don't pay any attention, we'll just take care of things. Well, that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen with us. We've got people that watch us all the time. And school boards should too, because they're elected and they're spending taxpayer money, and they should be beholden to the taxpayers and the parents of the district. So this is not about elections and how they turned out. This is not about 2 districts. This is about more than that we've heard from constituents. And Representative Wilson, I have steadfastly not called out specific school districts as I have worked on this bill, because that's not what it's about either. It's about asking all school boards to do this. We did compromise on this bill quite a bit with the lawyer-client privilege piece, and it really doesn't impinge on that anymore. And asking that we just understand how long is spent on particular issues that school boards deal with, that spend taxpayer money, is really not too much to ask. So this is a bill that even beyond the educational community, people can see as right and true. The Denver Post, after the last bill died, wrote an editorial and said, "What a shame that a school board transparency bill, a matter of simplicity and common sense, fell victim to heavy lobbying." And I won't read you the whole article, but they end, "And we hope this measure, or one like it, is reintroduced next session." Well, Denver Post, we didn't wait till next session. We see the value of this now, so I ask for your yes vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House of the passage of Senate Bill 182 on 3rd reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Representatives Mitch Bush, Moreno, and Pedersen. Close the machine with 36 aye votes, 26 no votes, 3 excused, and 0 absent. Senate Bill 182 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to Senate Bill 162.
Senate Bill 162 by Senator Nicholson, House Representative Mitch Bush, concerning quality management programs for emergency medical service providers providing care in the pre-hospital setting.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 162 on 3rd reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 162 on 3rd reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 62 aye votes, 0 no votes, 3 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 162 is passed. Co-sponsors. You want to do it? I'll do it. You can say it's my fault. It is. Don't worry, he's going to do it. Thanks, Rhonda. Close the machine. Mr. Carlo, please read the title to Senate Bill 174.
Senate Bill 174 by Senators Heath and Johnston, also represents McLaughlin and Pabon, concerning the creation of the Prosecution Fellowship Program.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move for the passage of Senate Bill 174 on third reading and final passage.
Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I ask permission to introduce a third reading technical amendment.
We'll wait till the amendment is properly displayed, and Representative Pabon blames me because this is my fault. Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, based on the amendments that you introduced to Senate Bill 174, and I'm sure this wasn't, actually, I'm sure it was your fault because the drafter would have caught this. And but basically, the legislative declaration doesn't conform to the bill language where it says that, as it was introduced, 3 law students shall be from CU and 3 law students shall be from DU. The Speaker decided to change that to the 6 of the most qualified applicants, basically, but the legislative declaration still contains that language. So I want to ask permission to have this amendment introduced and passed.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is to grant Representative Pabon permission to fix my mistake to offer a third reading amendment. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Becker, Joshi, and McLaughlin. Close the machine. With 59 aye votes, 3 no votes, 3 excused, and 0 absent, Representative Pabon has granted permission to offer a third reading amendment. Mr. Assistant Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I move L008. It's properly displayed, and I believe I've explained why we need the amendment. Ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House is the adoption of Amendment L008 to Senate Bill 174. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representative Peniston. Close the machine. With 62 aye votes, 0 no votes, 3 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Amendment 8 to Senate Bill 174 is passed. Seeing no further discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 174 as amended on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Conti, Del Grosso, Dorr, McNulty, Navarro, and Zabo. Close the machine. With 48 aye votes, 14 no votes, 3 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 174 is passed as amended. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 87.
Senate Bill 87 by Senator Ulrich, Representative Fields, concerning issuance of identification cards to people who are lawfully present in the United States but may have difficulty with certain documentary evidence in connection with making and reducing appropriations.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 87 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 87 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Lawrence, McNulty, and Wilson. Close the machine. With 40 aye votes, 22 no votes, 3 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 87 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 133.
Senate Bill 133 by Senator Newell, Representative Melton, concerning the regulation of private investigators by the Department of Regulatory Agencies in connection with making appropriations.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 133 on third reading and final passage.
Representative Giroux.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we had a long conversation about this. We had videos from, I believe, Tom Selleck, a good Republican, where he verified that he would not vote for this. And we also had, I believe we had Dog the Bounty Hunter out there in the lobby earlier today, which gives me further reason why we shouldn't vote for this. You know, if I were given the choice of watching Dog the Bounty Hunter at home and doing just about anything, I'd do just about anything other than that. The real issue with this bill is the three-legged stool of the Department of Regulatory Agency, and that's education, experience, and examination. This bill, I'm okay with education, but I'm not okay with experience. And those individuals that are lobbying for the bill told me that experience would never be able to be qualified for this bill. So that tells me this is not quite ripe yet. Examination, there is an examination, but there's a three-legged stool because if you don't have the three legs, it falls over. This bill falls over. It doesn't pass muster. The sponsor of the bill is a very good person. I respect him. I think he's doing a great justice to those that he's advocating for, but they don't deserve the hard work he's doing because they can't pass muster. They don't pass the three-legged stool. It's not meant to hurt you, Representative Melton. It's meant to hurt those that you're representing. Our responsibility with the Department of Regulatory Agency is to make sure that we protect the health, safety, and welfare. You can't protect the health, safety, and welfare if you don't have a program that actually passes muster. This program does not pass muster. I won't waste your time. I'm just telling you, Tom Selleck wouldn't vote for this bill. If Dog the Bounty Hunter and his wife really thought about it, they wouldn't support this bill. So why should you? I ask for a no vote.
Representative Melton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I ask for an aye vote on Senate Bill 133. I'm really glad that we had a dress rehearsal for last night, because there were there were 5 words I'm going to just say here right now. And that was Giroux said, "You are right." She said that Dora didn't recommend a licensure when they did. Dora has been at the table. Both PI groups have been at the table. And we went through, yes, all the iterations of bills of the past. But we worked all summer to make sure that we finally got the right balance in this bill. So members, I do ask for an aye vote.
Don't you leave me.
Thought you liked this time.
Okay,
Ask
to
for an aye
the bill.
vote on 133. Thank you.
Representative Giroux.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And
Speaker.
Representative Melton, you were right about the fact that I said you were right and I was wrong. But what I said was you were right that DORA recommended regulation. They did not recommend licensure. The white paper specifically says they recommend regulation. Regulation would be registration. They don't recommend licensure. That's the point, members. You don't license somebody in the same realm that you register somebody. And Representative Kagan very rightly said it when he said there are 2 levels of licensure in the bill as it's represented. The first level is that you haven't committed a crime. And if we're licensing people because they haven't committed a crime, what threshold is that? with all due respect to the profession, this isn't the way to go. Where we want to go is actually closer to where Representative Gardner was the first time in registration. Now, Representative Gardner tried to pass a bill, and he did pass a bill for voluntary registration. And that didn't work because the good guys would register and the bad guys didn't. So what we ended up with was a program that I believe was about $70,000 in the hole. And so what we really should be doing is cutting our losses and running, because this group should not be licensed. You don't license a group that the threshold is you haven't committed a crime. That's not a licensure threshold. That's actually embarrassing. That's why I believe Tom Selleck, and God help me, Dog the Bounty Hunter would say, this is not a bill that we want to go forward with. I ask for a no vote.
Representative Melton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And although I didn't ask Dog the Bounty Hunter to come here today because he was here for another bill, he heard about our bill and was actually in support of this bill, but that's not really what I'm going to harp on. It's the fact that you're saying that licensure isn't necessary, or this isn't a group that should be licensed. And in committee, I said that 45 states required licensure. And I was wrong when I said that, because it's actually 47 states that require licensure. 47 states require private investigators to be licensed. Why? Because they're going through your personal records. They're going through your personal life. And we want to make sure that people aren't abusing the system. So I think that Colorado should catch up with the rest of the nation. I think that we should make sure that private investigators go through a background check, that they go through fingerprinting, that we make sure that they pass a jurisprudence test. And for that third peg leg of experience, that's why we have a two-tier system. One tier that says, if you're new, you can get into this game, and one that says that if you've been in the game, you can supervise others. So we've got all of that, and I believe I'm being told to wrap it up. Good night. I'll be here all week.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 133 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Members, can we please vote? Representatives Kraft, Tharp, and Giroux. Close the machine with 35 aye votes, 27 no votes, 3 excused, and 0 absent. Senate Bill 133 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title to Senate Bill 164.
Senate Bill 164 by Senators Carroll and King, also Representatives Gardner and McLaughlin, concerning aerial firefighting efforts through the Division of Fire Prevention and Control in the Department of Public Safety in connection with implementing recommendations made by the division regarding Colorado Firefighting Air Corps.
Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 164 on third reading and final passage.
Please continue, Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members,
hold on one sec, Representative
Gardner.
Members, we are sitting as a House. Thank you. Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My aide, Jerry Wheeler, who I think all of you know, thought that it was appropriate that we pin a march for the Colorado Firefighting Air Corps, which I will as part of the persuasion to vote for Senate Bill 164, at least sort of hum the words for you. We are the Colorado Firefighting Air Corps. We douse the flames from the sky. We are the Colorado Firefighting Air Corps. We bring relief from on high. I ask for an aye vote.
Representative Sonnenberg.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I have no idea how I will follow that. Except to say, members, this bill was supposed to be in response to this report. This report says in the executive summary, the principal finding, the success of Colorado's wildfire or wildland fire management program depends upon the aggressive initial attack and response in order to keep fires that threaten lives, property, or natural resources small. Nowhere in this book, nowhere in this book is there a mention of a center of excellence. Wasn't part of the recommendation. Doesn't explain how a center of excellence is going to help us with wildland fires. Was not part of the recommendation. We don't even have the money to fund what was recommended in this book. But yet, instead of putting money against fires, we're going to spend it on a center of excellence. A center of excellence, and if you look at your impact or your fiscal note, you'll see in 2014, 2015, 19.3 FTEs. Another 9 FTEs the following year. And what do those FTEs include in the Center of Excellence? Full-time positions for a grant writer, technology integration specialist, military integration specialist, an economist? An economist? To fight fires. Data analyst and an accountant. I suppose if you build an ivory tower, you need to have an accountant to figure out how that money's spent in that ivory tower. Members, it also talks about the airplanes that we can't afford, and part of those airplanes also include large air tankers. Now, we were told that those large air tankers would be eliminated because they don't have the money for it. But that's not in the bill. So what are we spending the money on? There's no question we need helicopters in the seats to have immediate response. And if we spend more money on the seats, the single engine air tankers, and distribute them through the state, so at the first sign of smoke or the first report, we deploy them and they're there within 20 minutes, we make a huge difference. It's not like a large air tanker that may have to come from Grand Junction to go to Colorado Springs, in which it takes longer than the 20 minutes to pre-flight them and then to fly them over. You know how much a fire can grow in that 2 hours? Ladies and gentlemen, I'm asking you to vote no on this bill. Not because we don't need fire coverage, because we can already do this. We already authorized a year ago in House Bill 13, and now I don't remember the number, 245 maybe, but we didn't have the funding. We authorized the funding for that this year. They have the ability to do that, to manage fires. But instead, what we've created and what we're going to create is a center of excellence. I still have not had it explained to me how a center of excellence puts out fires. Ask for your no vote on Senate Bill 164.
Representative McNulty.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Sonnenberg, I supported the amendment that I think you offered, or someone with the same opinion that you have about the Center of Excellence offered, that moved that money into fighting fires, but it didn't pass. In my opinion, this bill should still pass. I think Representative Gardner has done a very good job explaining why we need the bill, why we ought to have the bill, and why we have to pass the bill now. I suspect Representative McLaughlin will share his opinion on this matter here shortly. What I've known about fighting fires, I've learned from the emergency management folks in Douglas County, from the county commissioners in Douglas County, and from an incident that happened in the district that I represent. Highlands Ranch is considered wildfire country. When you look at a map, it is alongside Conifer and Evergreen and Teller County, Woodland Park. We had a fire lightning strike, lit a fire in open space in Highlands Ranch, in the middle of suburban cul-de-sacs, neighborhoods, and schools. You could easily see where a fire like that would rage out of control, and the winds whipped it up, and it started hopping from house to house. The reason that didn't happen is because Douglas County has a helicopter on contract. During wildfire season, they have a helicopter on contract that they send to situations exactly like that happened in Highlands Ranch. And they knocked that fire down. They knocked that fire down before it grew and threatened homes, threatened lives, threatened schools. Same thing what happened in the Pike National Forest. Say, did you get permission from the U.S. Forest Service? They said no. We don't ask for permission. We put out the fire and beg for forgiveness later. Forest Service never really complained. They didn't have to fight a fire. But it is having that direct and quick response to hit it hard, to hit it fast, before that 1 acre fire or 5 acre fire grows into a 50 acre or a 500 acre or a 5,000 acre fire, threatening homes, threatening schools, threatening our reservoirs. One of the most devastating effects of the Hayman fire was the effect that it had on the ability for Denver Water and Aurora to store water, to make sure that water quality was at the level that they needed to serve their customers. We don't often think about that when we think about these wildfires, but it is a very direct and real consequence when we have watersheds burn, particularly when we have watersheds burn in the area directly adjacent to our metropolitan areas that provide us with our water. For those of us who represent people in Pueblo and El Paso County and the Denver metro area and up into Fort Collins along the Front Range. And so, Representative Sonnenberg, though I supported your amendment to put that money into fighting wildfires and am disappointed that it lost, I also believe that Senate Bill 164 offers us the opportunity to offer throughout the state of Colorado the same type of response that our county commissioners in Douglas provide to us. And that is the ability to put these fires out quickly, effectively, before they start, before they whip up, after they start, before they whip up, and before they become the deadly and devastating wildfires that Colorado has seen so much of in the last several years. So colleagues, as we consider Senate Bill 164, I hope that you will consider yourself to be an aye vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Rankin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know that we talk about the Center of Excellence. I just want to make sure that we all understand that a Center of Excellence is not a working group, it's not a commission, it's not a study, it's not even a task force. And if there's no other reason we passed this bill, is that we have yet in this session to create a Center of Excellence. And we should create one just to add to our list of things we've created. So, you know what? But, you know, seriously, this Center of Excellence is a physical place where there will be people, there will be aircraft, there will be visiting people from the Forest Service and the BLM. There will be other states coming to visit, and we will investigate things like the use of agricultural aircraft, Representative Sonnenberg, for firefighting. We will be looking at the conversion of military aircraft for firefighting. These are important things, and we were told in testimony that nobody has really looked at this technology for about 40 years. To me, you know, we should not go out and buy aircraft and fly them around unless we really know what we're doing with them. It might be comforting to see an air tanker. I've actually sat in my driveway one afternoon, took a lawn chair out and had a martini and watched slurry bombers flying over. It's cool to watch, and it makes you feel good. But I've also been to an incident command center and seen the technology that goes into controlling crews and monitoring the fire and putting out the fire. And we need to integrate aerial tankers, aerial firefighting with that technology. And that's what this will do. For me, and I think I said it before, if we combine aerial firefighting aircraft with this center, we will become a center of excellence, not just for Colorado, but for the nation. This is an exciting prospect, and I'd pay for it out of advanced industry funding if we could just do the center, because I think it will advance an area of technology that needs advancing in both the state and the country. So let's create a center of excellence. Let's get some airplanes to fly over to make us feel better, and let's move out with this.
Representative McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor to serve with you, even as we approach 11 o'clock in the evening. Members, there is nothing in the report authored by Chief Cook about not thinking. There's nothing in there that says we don't need to plan for the future. The Center for Excellence addresses those issues, and this is a very good bill. I would ask for your support. Thank you.
Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My short lyric aside, Representative Holbert asked me a question that itself was a bit sobering, and this may actually be my last bill, although I'm not certain. There may be some things over in the Senate still floundering around and percolating. But that was profound for me as I began to think about it, because the reason I'm carrying this bill has so much to do with my legislative service, and one of the most I guess one of the events that made the deepest impression on me for all of my lifetime. Let me tell you about a Saturday in June of 2012. I was enjoying a nice Saturday. It was clear and sunny, very warm. enjoying it because I had been far enough away from the Colorado General Assembly that the cobwebs were cleared out. And I actually drove to the local Walmart. Yeah, I know some of you don't shop at Walmart. I do. But as I did, and as I went into the Walmart, I looked up toward Ute Pass, and those of you who know El Paso County and Teller County know that Ute Pass is up between Colorado Springs and Woodland Park, and I looked up, and there was a plume of smoke. And I thought, that really can't be good, but I was going about my Saturday errands and wondered about it and knew that it was seen by people far more capable than I to do something about it. And I went on in and I began to do my shopping, and I went around, and I have to tell you, as I shopped and shopped, and I just sort of passed from my mind. It's funny how these things occur, because I had my phone with me, as we all do these days, and after several minutes, I looked down and I saw that I had a text from someone that I always take the text from immediately. It was from my daughter. It was from my daughter, who was on the other side of the country from me, saying, "Dad, is the fire in your district?" And I'd only been in the store about 30 minutes. And she had already seen it on national news. And I thought maybe it was time to just leave my shopping cart. And I went outside, and the little plume of smoke was much larger. And before that was in the mid-morning. Before that afternoon was over, I found myself in Green Mountain Falls, if you know where that is in Ute Pass, Representative Nordberg does, with officials from my county government, officials from the State Forest Service. It was a week before the transfer of responsibility for firefighting had been taken from the Forest Service to the Division of Fire Prevention and Safety, which caused its own problem that afternoon because we had some difficulty getting state resources. I was initially told by my county firefighters that they were having difficulty getting the state to bring resources to bear because there wasn't money available. And, Mr. Speaker, this goes to the bill and why we need this bill. There weren't resources available. I'm looking for Representative Giroux because I texted her on that Saturday afternoon in June and said, "Sherry, do we have money to fight fires?" And she told me that the Joint Budget Committee had actually allocated money and there was money available. And the result was that we were able to make a couple of phone calls, and with the assistance, and I will be forever grateful to Governor Hickenlooper and his staff and his chief of staff, that we brought those resources to bear. That was a Saturday afternoon. By Monday, I was sitting in a local high school with residents, all from my district, wondering how long they would be evacuated and wondering why they needed to be evacuated even though the fire was 3 miles away. Within 24 hours, that fire that was 3 miles from their homes had taken their homes. I look back on that and, well, and I look back on that through the prism of, that was the Waldo Canyon fire, through the prism of the Black Forest fire, which was even more devastating, but could have been much more so had we not learned the lessons in 2012. It's amazing to think that fire was more devastating than Waldo Canyon, but would have been worse had we not brought the resources to bear that we had garnered from the previous year and the lessons learned from the previous year. Representative Giroux, you may have missed it. I was expressing my personal gratitude to you for that Saturday afternoon when I texted you about resources for the fire, and you assured me that they were available and that our Joint Budget Committee had made the necessary provisions for what you did not know would happen, but did. And that is what Senate Bill 164 is about, making provision for resources for something that, unfortunately, I think we are certain at a level that we would rather not be, but certain we will need, and to assure that they are available. Now, the controversy around Senate Bill 164 seems to be about the Center of Excellence. But one of the things, and the theme through this story is this: there are lessons learned, and each and every time that we are challenged.
Representative Gardner, you have 30 seconds left.
I am the proponent of the motion, Mr. Speaker.
Still have only 10 minutes. You can speak as many times as you want, but may not speak longer than 10 minutes.
Very well, Mr. Speaker. And so, for that reason, I carry this bill and ask for an aye vote.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 164 on third reading, final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine, and members proceed to vote. Representative Del Grosso and Fisher. Close the machine with 51 aye votes, 11 no votes, 3 excused, and 0 absent. Senate Bill 164 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 187.
Senate Bill 187 by Senators Aguilar and Roberts, also Representative Stevens and Schaefer, concerning creation of the Colorado Commission on Affordable Health Care to analyze health care costs in Colorado in connection with making appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 187 on third reading and final passage.
Representative Swan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Hold on one sec, Representative Swan. Members, it's too loud in here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I've given this bill quite a bit of thought over the last few days. And, you know, the bill, there is no question that the bill raises important issues. Healthcare costs are important not just for our state, for the people of our state, but for our country. And if we don't get a handle on these costs somehow, we're in trouble. And so the intention of the bill, or at least
the purported intention of the bill is good. But what occurred to me as I thought about the bill, there's a real question here. And we have to make this decision. And I'm going to use it again. Does this bill have a laser-like focus on
members? Thank you.
On lowering costs, or is this going to be a $400,000 dust magnet? Because that's really what we're talking about here. It's going to be $400,000 to put together some more reports. And we all know, I may be the most guilty one in here about reading these reports. I guess I don't know, but we all are guilty of that. We get so much stuff. We're inundated. If we wanted to, we could devote our entire life to reading these reports generated by these commissions and so on and so forth. But will this thing really have any impact? And it's not just what the commission decides. I think the commission's probably set up in a way that's desirable. It looks like it's nonpartisan, but it's not just what the commission does. Then you've got to get whatever the commission decides on through the legislative process. And I've come to this well before and argued against certain mandates. And then during the election time, I see the commercials running against me, call Representative Swam and tell him to quit voting against breast exams for women. And you know how those pictures look of the woman sitting there with bald head. And so, I mean, those are not easy votes to cast. But, if we're going to deal with costs, we have to somehow confront. You can't give everyone everything they want because it costs. There is no such thing as a free lunch. So yeah, we might get great ideas out of this commission, but it still has to go through this political process. And this political process is a meat grinder, and not just in terms of making sausage, but it's tough votes that need to be cast if we're really going to make some changes. So here's some things that created concerns for me as I looked over the bill and ran those amendments the other day. First, I don't know how many times I didn't sit down to bother to count them, but the phrase access, the word access was referenced in this bill many, many times. My friends, the Affordable Care Act has guaranteed access. There is no question any longer that if somebody wants insurance, the health insurance companies they cannot say any longer, no, you have a pre-existing condition, you cannot get health insurance. The way these plans work, you have preventive care benefits for almost anything you can think of, although I'm sure there's some conditions that are not perfectly covered. But the preventive care is not only covered, but it's covered with no out-of-pocket costs. And then on top of that, you get comprehensive coverage beyond that without any dollar limit whatsoever. Now, what does that do when you have no dollar limit on the amount that you can make a claim for under these health insurance policies? Well, sorry, folks. It raises costs. It reminds me of something my wife says once in a while. She's a nurse again. And I know she's told me if the bill runs up towards $1 million, just put me out of my misery. I imagine we've all seen people in that situation. So that's a concern. Access is guaranteed, and the more that we guarantee access, the higher costs go. So it concerns me that access appears over and over and over in this bill. Another thing and again, I ran an amendment on that. I ran an amendment on the singling out the phrase high deductible health plans. I said, let's not just single out high deductible plans, let's look at low deductible plans. And what were we told repeatedly on second reading? We were told that, well, this was a broad coalition of folks that came together to look very carefully at this issue. Well, if they did so, they didn't single out high deductible plans and exclude low deductible plans, in my estimation, by accident. That was intentional because people and health insurance premiums and people just behave differently. Trust me, when they've got a low deductible plan as opposed to a high deductible plan. Premiums are different, dramatically different. Low deductible plans cost more than high deductible plans. And I just think that it was wrong, that we should have told this commission to look at low deductible plans as well. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about, I don't want to steal his thunder, but I do want to talk about the amendment that Representative Humphrey ran on the Affordable Care Act. Now, I'm going to direct you to page 11 of the bill, the revised, the re-engrossed version, lines 24 to line 26. And the bill specifically says that the commission is directed to contact our congressional delegation about changes that would be appropriate in federal law to reduce health care costs. But for some reason, we rejected Representative Humphrey's amendment that would have included the Affordable Care Act as part of this bill. Again, why is that? Is the Affordable Care Act sacrosanct? It's got to be off limits? We're supposed to tell our congressional representatives that what they should be doing to help make health care costs more affordable in this state, but we rejected an amendment to include the Affordable Care Act in this bill. So, for those reasons, my fear is that this bill is going to be yet one more dust magnet. So I'm a no. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Humphrey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I rise in opposition to Senate Bill 14-187.
Members? Yes, you. Thank you. Representative Humphrey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I was saying, I rise in opposition to Senate Bill 14-187, Colorado Commission Affordable Health Care. Looking at on page 3, under the legislative declaration, the factors that may contribute to escalating health care costs, it lists lack of competition or suppressed competition due to government regulations, and then flipping back on page 9 where we talk about duties of the commission, and I just didn't see that was drawn out very well. So I think that it is appropriate to add under there, which we did not do, consideration of the Affordable Care Act and the exchange and their effect on driving costs and increasing costs. And as Rep. Swan pointed out on page 11, again, one of the purposes here is to make recommendations to our congressional delegation about changes in federal law that may need to be made to make health care affordable in Colorado. And I think it's unfortunate that we didn't do that. Makes all the sense in the world to look at that big picture and consider those issues, to give this commission permission to do that, to make them feel that that's something that we think is important, to look at those sorts of economic irrationalities that can be created by that unprecedented level of government intervention in a takeover of our healthcare system in this country. So I urge a no vote on this bill.
Representative Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. So I'm not going to take us down the trip down memory lane, but as of today, I don't know if anyone's checked, we are under the Affordable Care Act. Does everybody know that? Is everybody aware that this is the law of the land? Does everybody get that? I don't like it. I'm not for it. It is the law of the land. I can certainly understand Representative Swam and Representative Humphrey saying, oh, we need to look at this. This bill does. Folks, this bill deals with that. This bill says we're not only going to look at the rules and regulations and make recommendations to our congressional representatives, we're going to take a look at that. We're going to look at cost drivers. We're going to look at what is happening with plans and premiums. We're going to look at areas like mountain areas and why we have one hospital and why are costs going up. We're going to look at that, and we're going to take the 30,000-foot view. So I respect what Representative Humphrey and I respect what Representative Swam are saying. It's in here, okay? I know, it just kind of boggles my mind that, in other words, when we say we're going to look at rules, regs, and how that affects our cost drivers, we're going to look at Medicaid expansion, we're going to look at plans, premiums, that's what's going to happen. And modeled after the CCJJ, which is what this commission is modeled after to take that view, I would submit to you, I don't know where some of my friends on judiciary are on it, but CCJJ has done some good work. They've taken a 30,000-foot view, and they have tackled some very tough issues. And when you talk about plans and people coming together to get this thing done, they didn't come idly. It's not like everyone went skipping down the byway to come to the table. This is going to be uncomfortable. And as we said in committee hearing, these are going to be very tough conversations. They're not going to be easy. But members, the tough conversations are what we have to have, because in 2 to 3 years, as there are the dropping of certain federal dollars and states are going to have to pick up more, we've got to answer these questions. And frankly, I think this is the responsible way to go. I don't view this commission, because CCJJ, Representative Swam, is not gathering dust on a magnet, okay? CCJJ is a vital, it is an active commission that engages a lot of stakeholders to get the job done. That's what this commission will do. And I want to assure at least the colleagues on my side of the aisle, I will tell you again, NFIB and C3 and even Club 20 would not have come to testify or write on behalf of this if they thought we were roaring down the highway on something very opposite of where they really believe, because small business, and by the way, this is towards small business. Small business picks up 80% of the healthcare costs and the premiums and dealing with healthcare with their employees. Come on. So members, I want to assure you, I think this was done in a very responsible way, and I'm amazed everyone came to the table. There's no one more surprised than me that this thing has come together in terms of people saying, yeah, I'm going to come have the conversation. Yeah, I'll come to the table. I may not like it, I may not want to, but I will. And members, with that, I urge and I vote.
Representative Schaefer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I have gone through the entire bill. If there's any doubt in anybody's mind whether costs are addressed under the Affordable Health Care Costs Commission, Senate Bill 187, There are 40 places that I have marked in orange, and I'd be glad to show those to you. We have had a large coalition of all the stakeholders, including the Colorado Center on Law and Policy, the Colorado Consumer Health Initiative, and members, any of you that have legitimate questions, which many of you may, are invited to attend the meetings during the interim session of the commission. They will be online, they will be public, and that will be the place to bring up your concerns. The commission will also be reporting at the SMART Act hearing. So I want to thank Representative Stevens for working with me on this one. And members, I ask for an aye vote. Thank you.
Representative Swan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I had to rise one more time briefly. Representative Stevens said that what I called before the Affordable Care Act is the law of the land. Well, I'm not going to call it the Affordable Care Act anymore. I'm going to start calling it or referring to it as Obamacare. Now, why is that? This last fall,
Representative Swan, 30 seconds.
This last fall, the Obama administration unconstitutionally and without any fairly well, any permission from Congress, delayed the employer mandate. They had no authority to do so, and it's not the law of the land. They're conducting themselves lawlessly.
Representative Swan, your time has expired.
Thank you.
Is there any further? Representative Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I was struck by my friend and colleague, Representative Stevens' impassioned defense probably is the wrong word, her impassioned argument for Senate Bill 187. I have heard many of you say that this is about the single-payer system and the creation of a single-payer system. I can tell you that based on my work on the Health Benefit Exchange Legislative Oversight, Health Benefit Exchange Implementation Legislative Oversight Committee with Representative Stevens, that she would do almost anything to ensure that we do not go down the road of a single-payer system, which would be a failed system for America's health care. It would be wrong for our people. It would be wrong for our communities. It would be wrong for our families. So when I hear that, I have to ask myself, where does it come from? And I go and I look at the bill and I read the bill over again, and there is nothing there about that. The bill is eminently reasonable and aimed at ensuring that those of us who believe that the Affordable Care Act, as constituted today, is a serious mistake. This bill is aimed at ensuring that we have the data to demonstrate that, and that we do something to address the problem of health care in Colorado as we move forward, because I believe that surely over the course of time, the Affordable Care Act system will fall of its own weight. Senate Bill 187 is a cost containment commission bill. And surely both sides of the aisle can agree that cost containment in healthcare is appropriate, we're going to have, I think the discussions in that commission are going to be, I hesitate to say heated, but they are going to be intense. But when we spend literally tens of billions of dollars annually on health care, 1/6 of our economy, even tens of billions here in Colorado, public money, private money, employer money, isn't it worth a few $100,000 in all of the millions that have been appropriated here this year? Isn't it worth a few $100,000 to see if we can find some savings in the system? Some regulations that are costing us money and impeding the system, some procedures that we might change, some ways in the healthcare delivery system that we can bring about efficiencies. Can't we get the right people at the table to do that? That is what this commission is about, among other things. The intent of this commission is to study healthcare costs and look for changes to the system, whether they're major tweaks or whether they are major changes or just simply tweaks in the system to save money. And there are tens of billions of dollars at stake. For those of us who contend that excessive regulations are one of the major cost drivers, the public deserves to know whether indeed these regulations unnecessarily increase cost. And for those on my side of the aisle who say, well, this is going to take us down the road of single payer, no, it's important that we have people there who believe like Senator Stevens, Representative Stevens, who believe, as she does, as I do, that those regulations are costing us money and they're impeding access to health care, not improving it. But we ought to have the courage on this side of the aisle, the courage of our convictions to say, not only do we believe it, but we can demonstrate it, and this commission will prove it. Now, do I expect that others will say, no, 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 you're wrong? Well, that's happened several times today already. And if you, my friends and colleagues to my right, if you are afraid that we are on a road to single-payer health care, I think you're right. That's the road we're on, and we're not going to get off that road, and we're not going to change it without good data and a commission that can study it. We cannot stick our heads in the sand. We need to know things like, are people getting gouged by their providers or their insurance companies? I'm not suggesting that they necessarily are. But you know, some of the studies show around the country that if you have a major cardiac procedure in some regions, some cities, some areas, you'll get charged exorbitant amounts of money. And if you have that 500 or 1,000 miles across the United States, someplace else, it'll be half the cost. What's that about? You know, if I go into McDonald's in Washington, D.C., or San Antonio, Texas, or Denver, Colorado, while there will be some price variation for my Happy Meal, there's not going to be such an extreme variation that I will notice very much. But that's not the case with some major medical procedures. And this Cost Containment Commission is going to look at that data. What's it cost to have that procedure done in Denver and in Colorado Springs and in Grand Junction, and what's it cost in Philadelphia and Los Angeles. That data is there, but we need to look at it. We need to know why. We have passed innumerable bills in the past 10 years about saving money in health care, and we need to know if the bills that we have passed in those last 10 years are saving money or not, whether they're costing more than they were worth, whether they've been for naught, whether perish the thought that legislators stood down here and argued to their colleagues that we needed to vote aye because it was going to save us a bunch of money, and guess what? It didn't. It cost us more. We need to know that. We need to know how to encourage competition amongst the providers. Those of us on this side of the aisle say that we need to bring competition to the system, and when we do, and when we have patients taking charge of their own health care, it will bring down cost. We believe that. We can demonstrate that. This commission is a forum to make that case. And we need to make the case. And we ought, and I primarily speak to my colleagues over here to my right, do not cede the ground. This bill will pass. It will pass.
Representative Gardner, you have 30 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's hard to believe that my time has gone so quickly, but I asked for an aye vote on Senate Bill 187.
Seeing no further discussion, the question before the House is the passage of Senate Bill 187 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine. Members proceed to vote. Representatives Hollinghorse and Priola. Close the machine with 42 aye votes, 20 no votes, 3 excused and 0 absent. Senate Bill 187 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Kohler, please read the title of Senate Bill 194.
Senate Bill 194 by Senator Stem and also Representatives May and Giroux concerning the issuance of identification documents by the Department of Revenue in connection with making appropriation.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 194 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House, the passage of Senate Bill 194 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Representatives Gardner and Humphrey. Close the machine with 60 aye votes, 2 no votes, 3 excused and 0 absent. Senate Bill 194 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Mr. Cole, please read the title of Senate Bill 118.
Senate Bill 118 by Senator Stem and also Representative Melton concerning improving protections for individuals with disabilities.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move for the adoption of Senate Bill 118 on third reading and final passage.
Seeing no discussion, the question for the House is the passage of Senate Bill 118 on third reading and final passage. Mr. Kohler, please open the machine and members proceed to vote. Close the machine. With 60 aye votes, 2 no votes, 3 excused, and 0 absent, Senate Bill 118 is passed. Co-sponsors. Close the machine. Representative Labuda, announcements and directions.
Thank you, Mr.
Announcements.
Speaker. Members of Finance Committee, I believe I've contacted all of you. When we adjourn, we need to come down here to vote on Senate Bill 190. Thank you.
Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to lay over the balance of the calendar until tomorrow, May 2nd.
Seeing no objection, the balance of calendar will be laid over until tomorrow, May 2nd. Madam Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House stand in adjournment until tomorrow, May 2nd at 12:05 p.m.
Seeing no objection, the House will stand in a.m. 12:05 a.m. Madam Majority Leader. Seeing no objection, the House will stand adjourned until 12:05 a.m. tomorrow morning. Yes, sorry.
Finance Committee.
Oh, darn it.
They're off?
No, they're on.
They're on.
Okay, right.
Past my last bill, I'm done. I'm going home.
My last
Introduced? Are you serious?
Oh, yay! We got somebody. Thank you. Finance Committee, please come down. Come over.
Red Rover? Red Rover?
Red Rover.